Electrocast.
Wesley, where have you been? I have really missed you.
Who was this love of yours?
Oh, my sweet Wesley. A farm boy. Poor and perfect.
Why did you come here, Wesley?
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
We're gonna sizzler. It's Wesley Month.
Strong stuff, all right. It'll take a month.
A month?
Wesley Month.
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
Studi, Snipes, Ichishta. Welcome to Wesley Month at Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris, and I'm here with my older brother.
One of said Wesleys.
We're talking a movie from 1998. The Wesley in question is Snipes in Blade.
The rise and fall of Wesley Snipes lives and dies with Blade.
There are 3 Blades.
Yep. Do you know that Wesley Snipes has not had a successful starring role in which he is the lead since Blade Trinity? It's a weird thing like Star Wars. Blade 2 is the Empire Strikes Back, where it was the best or the most well-regarded, and I think the most well-received because it was directed by your boy, Guillermo del Toro. Blade Trinity, not so much. Kind of signaled the end of him as a true leading man in his own right, when the first one, in the first place, brought him to prominence where he really became the star, the A-list star.
So he became an A-lister with Blade, and then his career ended with Blade Trinity?
I mean, not ended. He has had a steady string of supporting roles and stuff, and he's still around. But to truly be the leading man, to carry the movie, not so much. Because not long after this, really all of his legal troubles came home to roost.
Yeah, don't mess with the IRS. So jumping way ahead, Blade 4?
The new Blade? The Mahershala Ali Blade?
Yeah.
Mahershala Ali is not a young dude, and they named him for Blade without exaggeration, I think like 6 years ago. And
Whoa.
It still hasn't gone into production.
Wait a second. I think it has an air date, like next November.
Well, that's what they always say, but premiere dates, they shift, and they have not filmed a single frame of principal yet for Blade.
And Blade's part of the Marvel Universe?
It is.
The Marverse?
The Marverse. No one's ever called it that, but Wesley Snipes and Blade, 1998, is kind of the beginning of the Marvel Universe as we know it.
I'm assuming you'd seen Blade before, like many times.
Uh-huh.
So my first time, and we just got off of watching White Men Can't Jump, and when Blade started, I was like, this is a comedy, right? And Brian turns to me and was like, what? Not a comedy.
Not at all.
So I've been thinking a lot about the holdovers and how Alexander Payne wanted to make a movie that wasn't about the 70s, but a movie of the 70s, a movie that was made in the 70s.
Yes, that typifies the 70s maybe even.
I think it's an important distinction and kind of an interesting creative proposition. I know that Blade suffers from like 90s CGI, but I feel like Blade, if you made Blade today as a movie of the 90s, that this is exactly what you would make.
Yeah, definitely dark and technified.
Like with like retro tech, but employed ironically. Like that tech, the boop, boop, boop with the 12 in the, what were they called? The Erebus? The Council of the 12 or whatever.
The Shadow Council, yeah.
And they like show them all lined up in that cylindrical room. And then they're like, it's like zoom in, enhance, decode. It's so cheesy. But if you wanted to pretend that something was 90s tech, that's how you do it.
Yeah, it's like noir tech. And the reason I think you firmly associate it with the 90s is because this was the aesthetic, right? I mean, how much does Blade look like The Matrix, with which it shares no creators in common? The Matrix is entirely its own thing, released the following year, but had a lot of similar themes, a lot of similar looks. Everything was very sterile and black leather and all this stuff. But the storyboards for The Matrix were done completely independently, and they share this weird late 90s DNA. Although it came a little bit later, David S. Goyer, who wrote Blade, also wrote the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, which this is basically Vampire Batman, right?
I can see that. So you're saying that The Matrix didn't bite off of Blade?
Didn't bite
that they were contemporary
off of Blade. No.
That they were contemporaries, that they were being made simultaneously and thus could not have bitten off of one another?
Yes. It's just kind of what everyone was about. Probably started the goth aesthetic started with Crow in 93. and of course Interview with the Vampire 94. But this is the Neo Vampire, right? This is the tech-heavy, super cool stuff with gadgets and bending the rules.
And black leather dusters with sunglasses.
So what's the other association with the holdovers that Blade enjoys?
You got me.
Wesley Snipes, under those sunglasses, I think those were functional for the character because he kind of has holdover eye.
He's not wall-eyed.
But Wesley Snipes definitely had some kind of procedure to correct a problem. And I think
in like IRL?
Yeah. And so I think it's masked by the sunglasses. It also makes Blade look cooler.
You know what else was very 90s?
What's that?
I fully expected Steven Dorff to like bust out with like, and I don't want the world to see me, because he was rocking the Johnny Resnick Goo Goo Dolls hair.
That's good. I was trying to figure out what it was like. I came up with it was like if they gave a Muppet rock star hair. Like, what is a Muppet? What is like a rock star Muppet? What does his hair look like? His hair looks
Johnny
like
Resnick.
It looks like one of the creatures from Edge of Tomorrow. It's like all spiky and spidery. It's a thing, man. That haircut looks absurd. But within the context of Blade in that universe, it's kind of cool.
I mean, he was probably the most comic booky of all the characters, but I'll just come right out and say it. I kind of really enjoyed Blade.
Yeah?
Yeah, I kind of had a lot of fun watching this movie.
It is still, I mean, the special effects definitely don't hold up, which unfortunately it kind of devolves into at the end. But Blade the first one was well regarded, and number 2 is considered one of the best comic book movies, certainly one of the best vampire movies. But that's interesting. Steven Dorff, not a bad choice. I think he was good as Deacon Frost. He was scary and intense. As we discussed in White Man Can't Jump, though, Wesley Snipes, all of 5'9" if he's an inch. So the two of them are little dudes battling it out with swords and stuff.
Wesley Snipes looks hulking and menacing and humongous in this movie.
As Whistler said, it's still, Blade said it's still heavy, and he's like, well, you're so big.
Well, he's jacked, but like he towers. That actress must be 5'2".
What was your favorite part of Blade?
It started out so strong. I liked the way they handled the dance scene, the rave scene. They go for it.
The banner in the back says Bloodbath is the name of the rave, and you don't actually get to read that until the blood starts to pour.
And it's pouring, and it gets gnarly. I'm assuming that dude was baited so that they could eat him, but then Blade interrupts.
Well, they weren't eating him right off the bat. They all could have converged on him, but they were like kicking him and having a good time with all that stuff. Poor dude.
I liked the Blade character. You might think he's unlikable because he is so mission-oriented and everything is mission-critical to him, but he kind of had this solemnity, which I love, and he was badass. It was a great combo.
Blade has always been cool. In this one, he has that leather jacket Batman style, but in the old comics, he is a much more kind of 70s black guy, kind of like a little afro and stuff, and he has his leather. I want him to look cool, and he has a leather jacket. And that's really all that carried over from the original Blade to this version. And Wesley Snipes gets it done, man. He's all buff or whatever, and he's got his tattoos and his severe hairstyle, and he trained in martial arts and all that good stuff. And he made it happen because Batman, his little cape is like silken and stuff and flows in the breeze. And Blade's coat doesn't flow in any breeze. So what does he do? He constantly does that coat flippy thing where like when he goes around corners, he flaps the coat himself.
The bulletproof vest, whatever his like tack vest thing that he was wearing was also hot. It's so 90s to like kick ass with martial arts and like samurai swords and stuff.
Yeah.
I was really grossed out when he employs Dr. Karen's vampire serum and they explode.
Yeah.
But then it made me laugh.
So, because it's so silly. And when Frost dies, spoiler by the serum. Man, Blade's traditional method, Buffy the Vampire style of staking them, but in this case with silver, that was so clean and convenient. They were like video game bad guys where you kick them and they fall down and they blink for a little bit and then the body disappears. In that one, there's no trace whatsoever. The serum was so much more messy.
It really was, but it makes for like that grand finale when he explodes or whatever. But why doesn't he silver stake that one demon dude, the one that he was tracking down at the club?
Oh, are you talking about Donald Logue, the long-haired dude?
Yeah, the comedy vampire
Yeah,
who keeps getting his arms cut off.
He ultimately kills him, just like he ultimately kills the White Widow.
No, I thought Dr. Karen does.
Yeah, she does, because it has to be like a girl-on-girl fight where the girl kills the girl one. That happens all the time. But yeah, they both hung around for a really long time to kind of be unceremoniously killed. So much so that amid all the other vampire deaths, you're like, wait, did they die? Did they get away?
They don't get a moment at all.
Right. This is the new style of vampire where they're familiar with tech and they're not musty and moldery, and they're in nightclubs and they find all the loopholes and whatever's convenient. The fact that they don't really have to sleep, they're not lulled into a trance-like sleep during the day in a coffin where you have to be in a coffin. They maybe don't sleep, and all they have to do to avoid the sun is put on their motorcycle helmets and leather outfits.
Or wear sunblock?
Or sunblock, dude. Come on. So it's messing with the rules to make it fun, hip, modern conveniences. I guess sunblock is technology, right? It's a little bit silly.
That was really silly. And I also didn't understand what was happening for a minute there. So Steven Dorff and Blade have a little, not showdown, but like...
conversation in broad daylight.
They meet in broad daylight. They're on this New York City street, and then there's a bus wipe, and suddenly they're in this like park. Was that the same location, or were they transported someplace to have their little tete-a-tete?
It did feel dreamy, like it wasn't real, like they were communicating in virtual reality or telepathically or something.
Right.
There's like a physical form being manifested of him in the daylight, like Olaf running around as a snowman in the sun and tanning and stuff. It didn't make sense. It was like a fantasy sequence.
It was, but the girl was there, and she definitely gets thrown, but then she runs away unscathed. So that was strange, but they just excuse it. It's that old technique of just excusing it by naming it. So Blade goes, sunblock. And somehow that's okay. It's like, okay, now we get it. That's allowed. He can use like SPF 2 million. How much is the SPF in Terminator 2?
That's what Sarah Connor says you would need to survive the annihilation blast is sunblock 2 million.
Speaking of Terminator 2, he was definitely also channeling some major Terminator with the leather pants and the leather boots and the shotgun, especially when he's wielding the shotgun.
Yeah, 7 years later.
Let me guess, Terminator 2, 92?
91.
So close. So why do people love Chris Christopherson?
I don't know. I actually had to look him up because I don't know a single Chris Christopherson song. Obviously he's a country singer, maybe not obviously. He also acted or whatever. He's about 80, late 80s now, 87, 88, but ended up in this movie and is gruff and really doesn't exist in my worldview anywhere else other than in Blade, the first one.
Well, he's definitely he's like the Alfred Q type character.
Yeah, he's the Billy Hoyle in this movie, and you can tell that Whistler is a tough dude because he's got a gas pump in his bat lair, the bat cave, and he fills the car up and he's smoking while he's gassing up the car. Whistler's tough, man. Blade first appeared, the connection to Dracula. He appeared in a comic called Tomb of Dracula. And then Whistler appeared when Blade had an arc in a Spider-Man series of comics. He appeared in Spider-Man for a while, and Whistler appeared. So he's like the sidekicky character or whatever, and he got his moment in this movie. But he's got his own backstory. He was like a legendary vampire hunter. He's Blade's mentor.
And surrogate father.
So what did you think of Blade story-wise? Blade is cool, and he's fast, and he kills, and he's effective, but all that ancient evil vampire Bible, ancient texts kind of thing, scrolls, summoning the blood god and stuff, all that was perfectly fine with you?
I think that's a fair question. The reveal of Magra.
La Magra, yeah. When
Steven Dorff becomes La Magra, little anticlimactic.
Really?
Basically, he just gets some red eye contacts.
Please tell me that you know about that was a pickup, that was a reshot ending.
Nope.
After a disastrous test screening, they went back in and shot the sword ending, which is awfully cool. Like, I get that he's not very La Magra, but that is totally by choice because he was the freaking blood god. And if you watch the deleted scenes, you can see the alternate ending of Blade, which is very famous and very much online, where he turns into a swirling blood tornado of La Magra. And the effects were never finished, but he would it would be swirling around, and then Steven Dorff would pop out of the blood tornado to taunt Blade, and test audiences hated it. So they went and filmed an entirely new ending where they have a sword fight, which is way cooler.
Yeah, but also 19th century, who fences to save the world?
It's super fast and super cool. It was like vampire fencing, and that was really cool. But they definitely backed off of La Magra by making him less blood god, like the least blood god possible, because the original ending was so reviled.
It does kind of start to fall apart. Why do they have the blade-sized bloodletter? Why do they need Blade's blood?
It's exactly 5'7", but appropriately buff.
Exactly. In fact, makes him look buffer. It's like the bat suit waiting in the bat cave, except
right?
It's a
They
blood
molded
letter.
it for him.
Was he prophesied? How did they need the blood of a half breed, of a daywalker, in order to make their ceremony complete?
Don't know. It does fall apart. There's definitely cabin in the woods elements, though. All this preceded that by 10 years or so.
It starts to fall apart. The doctor zombie in the basement thing and all that. I was like, nah. But by that point, I'm so along for the ride that I wasn't being critical.
No, they monologue and then toss her to her death and then walk away and be like, oh, I was kind of like her. And they just assume she's going to die, like throwing Luke into the Rancor pit. That was pretty brutal, man. Who knew that Curtis was going to make a comeback?
Curtis the doctor?
And then she
doctor guy?
predictably climbs out of there on her own, and he's still down there all mad.
Yeah, that was a weird Egyptian pyramid basement shoot.
Yeah, but it's antimicrobial and all that stuff, and expensive.
I don't know where they were, why the Erebus Council or whatever couldn't decode the ancient texts. I guess they just hadn't employed Frost's algorithm.
Yeah, Frost was originally an old, studious kind of dude, much older. I think he was a German scientist who was all about the blood god. Steven Dorff, not so much. He's the younger, hipper version.
Yeah, he's got babes and a house with an indoor pool.
Yeah.
And he's living the vampire dream.
Yep.
This had some good 90s one-liners.
Well, there's the most famous from this movie that I'm hoping you can decode for me.
Which is?
Some MRFers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Isn't that his parting line to Frost?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
Could that have been Revenant from the previous ending, the blood tornado ending?
I sourced it, and when they were discussing, because Wesley Snipes is a producer on Blade, and they were discussing the character of Frost and how best to handle it. And Wesley Snipes said he pictured Frost as being the kind of MRFer who was always trying to ice skate uphill. And director Stephen Norrington and David Goyer, they were like, we love it. And they actually put that line in the script, never bothering to explain what it means. It's been like a quarter century, and I still don't know what that line means.
Well, it's very difficult to ice skate uphill. You need...
Is it impossible?
Some kind of propulsion. It's too slick. There's no friction.
Right? So unless you have some momentum, then you can't do it. It just seems like an impossible task, right? Presuming that you can defeat Blade.
That's what he's trying to say?
I have to assume. It just seemed a little bit strange.
Doesn't he have some other cool, badassy ones?
Yeah, worse things out there than vampires. Like what? Me. And then he flips his sword into his jacket with the custom sword insert.
Come on, that's badass. It's just fun. You know what I like about it?
What?
I like that it's a superhero movie that's not all superhero-y.
He's very superhero-y, so explain.
It doesn't feel like a Marvel movie.
Yeah, it's darker for sure, but there's a lot of the tropes, especially the 90s tropes. The concept of the purebloods, right? They're basically vampire Nazis, and all in their high-backed Bela Lugosi vampire collar chairs and stuff for the Shadow Council meetings.
And so they don't like Blade because he's a half-blood, and they look down upon Frost because he's less than?
Right.
Because he was turned or whatever?
Yeah, and so this is the new regime. This is Frost and his band of upstarts, mudbloods, basically eliminating the old guard. And Nazis, you're safe to kill Nazis left and right. Deplorable people, and they make excellent villains. For that reason, you can kill them. Even vampire on vampire violence.
But Steven Dorff isn't there's just different levels of baddies, because obviously you want to kill Deacon Frost.
That's what I'm saying. How do you justify the killing from one vampire to the next? What makes them better vampires? Well, because the old ones are Nazis. It's strange. They treated Pearl, the archivist, aka Biscuit Boy, kind of respectfully. Like they never made fun of how fat that dude was. They just kind of roasted him. I mean, he couldn't get away. But I was like, ew, like that's really distasteful and frankly feels very Guillermo del Toro. But they didn't make fun of his size. I thought that was pretty progressive for a 1998 vampire movie.
That would have just been one of those cheap shots that they could have taken.
Yep, and they didn't.
It was pretty progressive for a 90s movie.
The original heroine, the original victim that Blade rescues was supposed to be a white lady. And Wesley Snipes was like, can we make it a black lady? Because he's producer and he's Wesley Snipes. Do you think that it was a little weird and icky the way Blade's mom ended up?
I mean, the mom only serves one purpose, and that is to distract and disarm Blade for long enough for Deacon Frost to get the upper hand. Because otherwise, Deacon Frost is always chasing and is never a match for Blade. But once he kind of, like, mom disarms him.
Yeah. It was just a little bit weird that she, like, was all up on Blade and then was, like, basically milking him for his blood god blood.
Yeah, and was she really into Deacon Frost, or was Frost just using her to get to Blade?
I don't know. It was weird. When the thing popped open, I was like, oh, right. Because I kind of didn't remember that stuff about the mom's betrayal.
She's very nice to him and kind of sympathetic, and then she goes all nutso when Blade decides he's going to go Kylo Ren.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's like 35 years or however old Blade is supposed to be in this movie of brainwashing by Deacon Frost.
Okay, so why is he called Blade?
Because this is a cutting edge vampire movie. Huh?
And maybe it's because I didn't see Blade back in the day, but for some reason this movie feels older and more 90s than The Matrix or The Lord of the Rings.
And I'll tell you why. It's because The Matrix employed lots and lots of visual effects, but not creatures per se. Now, when creatures are robotic, you have hard angles and shiny and red eyes. And when they're machines, that kind of lends itself better in a Terminator kind of way to special effects. But those like blood harpies or whatever looked dumb. The blood god looked dumb. When he slices Deacon Frost in half and his like guts come flying out and his hand regenerates, it looks terrible. When Blade gets digital, Blade gets dumb. And that's probably why it dates the most horrifically.
But I have to say a lot of it, the performances, the stunt choreography, the fight sequences, all very fresh, like all still holding up.
It may feel new and fresh to you, but Blade feels kind of old and tired to me. I've been through 3 of them, went through all his diva behavior. It kind of wrecked his leading man ability, Wesley Snipes' ability to lead a movie. And Blade 3 was pretty bad. You could do worse than Blade 2 for sure. I think you would actually like that one because you love Guillermo del Toro. But man, so let me tell you what dates the movie the most for me. You know the cool techno music when he walks into Bloodbath?
Yeah, it's like fully Prodigy.
Yeah, efficient German tech. Actually, Prodigy was offered to do the entire soundtrack, and they turned it down because they had too many other commitments. It is very Prodigy. It's like utilitarian German, like Rammstein kind of the techno. And such time and place for that song. The reason I said this was a neo-vampire movie was because this kind of became what vampires were to modern audiences when they're not stuffy and have like lace collars and lace undershirts and things like that. And when I went to Knott's Scary Farm, the Halloween haunt here in Southern California, the vampire dedicated maze was one giant disco. of vampires bursting out at you. And it wasn't a Blade tie-in because they didn't really have that yet. But so it was like 7 minutes of constantly that thing on a loop. And those poor vampire volunteers had to listen to that German vampire disco music all night long. So it was all strobe lights and fangs and people in sleek, like metallic clothing and stuff. And they reused those mazes. So I heard that for like 3 years in a row.
Wow.
And I didn't remember, I blocked it from my memory because that was all during the late 90s. It was over 25 years ago now. And still, once that music came on, I was like, oh, right, the Blade vampire music.
All right, IMDb user reviews 10 out of 10, style, class, and gallons of blood.
For its time, it was kind of different than any vampire movie we had seen up until that point. Had a very distinctive style, which you can see, which is evidenced in the later Marvel movies, but really the first of its type like that.
8 out of 10 stars, a marvelously enjoyable vampire flick.
I think if you examine it for what it is, Blade, I got no problem with Blade. It is tricky tying it into the larger universe. It's just kind of like it started things off in a way. Blade as a standalone movie is definitely an achievement.
It's almost like I wrote this review, 9 out of 10. Maybe it's my 90s nostalgia. And I'd also add vampire.
Yeah, kind of unpleasant. Kind of gross in some ways, even for a vampire movie. But I definitely saw all 3 Blades.
I'm looking for a bad review. This is the worst I can find. 2 stars, good effects and much fighting, but no horror.
What? The vampires were scary. It wasn't a scary movie. It was definitely an action movie, maybe even a sci-fi movie. And that car was really cool. But good effects? Was that written in 1998?
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know. Wesley Snipes assance. Wesley assance.
The last time I remember being charmed by him in a movie was when Eddie Murphy brought him in for Coming to America. And I think that he has ability and surprisingly comedic timing so that when interviewers say, you were the action guy, he was like, really? Because kind of more drama and comedy to start. How do you regard him? You'd never seen Blade. When you think of Wesley Snipes, do you think of White Men Can't Jump?
Yeah, in which he has incredible charisma and comic timing.
And some physical ability, because given that he didn't really play
Real
basketball,
physicality.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he put it into play. And he had done martial arts on his own, so the physicality needed for Blade, I think he really brought home.
And here he's all stoic and badass, and at least between the 2 movies, he demonstrates an incredible amount of rage. And that's why he is one third of Wesley Month here at Or Whatever Movies, featuring not only Wesley Snipes, but also Wes Studi, and of course, my co-host, Wesley. This is Wesley on Wesley.
That's weird.
Wesley on Wesley's?
That is kind of hot, though.
It's so weird. So we hope that you're enjoying Wesley Month. And Wesley, what is your final rating on Blade?
I like Blade. Maybe it's a little bit too grody for me for all the bursting vampire heads and stuff. But anytime he's got the sword, it looks cool, it feels cool. I got no problem with Blade. I think it's a little bit tainted by Wesley Snipes' antics behind the camera, not in front of it. But yeah, I have pretty fond memories of Blade. Definitely an all right movie, even in the modern context, because boy, at some points it's nearly sunk by those terrible special effects, but got to consider it for the time. And Blade is a well-crafted movie, not just a vampire movie, not just an action movie, but fun, all right movie.
I feel like my enthusiasm for Blade, which really could have gone either way, like if I was in a bad mood, I probably would have hated Blade.
Yeah.
But I feel like my enthusiasm pulled a more positive review out of you than perhaps you were prepared for.
And maybe. And are you going to watch Blade again? Which, of course, is the gauge for my rewatchability, generally influences my rating.
No, but I'm on board for Blade 2.
Never gonna watch Blade again? Check out Blade 2, it's good. Then I really recommend you stop, even though it has Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds. There were too many problems, and Wesley Snipes hates the movie. Blade Trinity, not really worth the time.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this discussion on Blade from 1998, available on Tubi. If you did, let us know. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to Transforming 45, the podcast that celebrates the incredible power of passionate voices. I'm your host, Lisa Boat. Join me in conversation with heart-led humans who share their deeply personal stories of transformation. Transforming 45 is here to uplift, connect, and remind you that it's never too late to write your next chapter. So get ready to be inspired, empowered, and transformed. Join me in this community where through powerful storytelling, we heal and reclaim our inherent magic.
Electricast. Electricast.
Welcome to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing, where we harmonise your mind, body and soul. I'm Amanda, your sound therapy expert.
And I'm Stephen, the curious explorer uncovering the mysteries of sound.
Together we explore vibrations, frequencies and the power of sound therapy and tuning forks.
Discover ancient wisdom, reduce stress and tune into a healthier life. Subscribe to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing today.
Electricast.